Florence, northern Italy, late 15th century, early nightfall. The light is low now. I can tell the day is ending, not by the sky, but by the way the shadows stretch slowly across the wooden floor. They grow longer without effort, as if the room itself were breathing more deeply. The workshop feels larger at this hour, not because it has changed, but because the noise of the world has withdrawn. During the day, everything competes for attention. At night, nothing does. I sit at the table and allow myself to remain still. There is no urgency now. No one is waiting. No one expects an answer. The air smells of oil, dust, and old paper. It is a familiar scent, one that asks nothing of me. My hands rest near the drawings I made earlier today. They lie where I left them, slightly overlapping, their corners softened by time and touch. Wheels, gears, lines that curve back into themselves. Some of these machines will never be built. I know this. And yet, I draw them anyway. Because drawing is not about completion. It is about understanding. When I imagine a mechanism, I do not imagine its success. I imagine its resistance, the way matter pushes back, the way weight insists on being felt. Every invention is a conversation, not with men, but with the world itself. And the world rarely answers quickly. I reach for the quill. The ink moves slowly, obediently. I notice how it flows, how it gathers, before releasing itself onto the page. It reminds me of water. Water never rushes. Even when it falls, it follows a path. I have spent days watching rivers, noting how they curve, how they avoid obstacles, without confronting them. The same laws apply everywhere, to water, to machines, to thought. Nothing moves without reason. Even stillness has its purpose. I pause again. Pauses are important. They reveal what motion hides. My eyes are tired now, but my mind continues quietly. I wonder, not for the first time, whether the world will ever catch up to what I am trying to understand. Then, I let that question go. Questions do not need answers to be useful. They only need space. The candle burns steadily. It does not hurry toward its end. I find comfort in that. Outside, the city has grown quiet. Footsteps fade. Voices dissolve into distance. The night has claimed its place. I remain at the table, unmoved, unhurried. The day does not end suddenly. It settles, and I settle with it. I remain seated for a while. Not because I am thinking with precision, but because nothing asks me to move. The window is still open. Cool air enters the workshop, carrying the faint smell of stone and water, brushing the edge of the table before slipping away again. Somewhere below, a voice rises, not close enough to form words, only a shape of sound passing through the street and dissolving into the night. I return my attention to the drawings. The lines appear heavier now, as if they have absorbed the hours spent tracing them, as if paper itself remembers time. I slide my fingers along the margin, careful not to touch the ink. The surface is warmer than I expect. Warmth lingers longer than intention. A small piece of charcoal shifts slightly on the table. It rolls just enough to be noticed, then stops. Even still, objects respond to balance. I think again about resistance, not as something to defeat, not as an obstacle, but as a language. Metal does not refuse out of spite. Wood does not bend out of obedience. Stone does not break to accommodate desire. They answer honestly. When a mechanism hesitates, it is speaking. It tells me where weight gathers, where pressure insists, where force has been placed too quickly. I add a single line to the drawing. Then I hesitate and leave it as it is. Completion carries its own gravity. Once something is finished, it begins to ask for explanation, for justification. Unfinished work asks nothing. It remains open, like a door left slightly ajar. The city grows quieter in layers, not all at once, one sound leaving, then another. A shutter closes somewhere nearby, wood striking stone. The echo travels briefly, then disappears into the walls. I listen for what follows. Nothing does. That absence feels deliberate. I stay where I am. The drawing remains incomplete. The night continues. And for now, that is enough. The sound of water reaches me before I think to name it. It moves through the open window without effort, steady and continuous, as if it had been waiting for the night to arrive. The fountain in the square keeps its rhythm, unchanged by the hour, filling the spaces left behind by quieter streets. It does not soften when voices fade. It simply becomes more present. I have heard it for so long that it no longer feels external. It feels familiar, almost internal, like something that belongs to the place itself. I let my attention rest there without trying to hold it. I remember standing beside rivers in other places, not to study them, not to measure their speed or depth, only to watch, to remain long enough for movement to become ordinary. Water never seems to decide, and yet it never stops. It curves around what it cannot move. It yields without retreating. It continues without asking permission. A light breeze enters the room, shifting the curtain just enough to remind me it is there, then releasing it again. The fabric settles back into place as if nothing had happened, and the room follows shortly after, returning to stillness. I wonder how much movement passes unnoticed each day. How many small adjustments keep things balanced without ever drawing attention. How much effort disappears into habit, becoming invisible through repetition. The fountain continues below, steady, patient. I imagine the stone basin worn smooth over time, not by force, but by constancy. Water returning to the same surface again and again, leaving its mark slowly and without intention. That thought stays with me longer than I expect. I do not pursue it. Some thoughts do not ask to be explored. They ask only to be allowed. Eventually, the sound blends back into the background, not because it is stopped, but because my attention has moved elsewhere. The night remains. The water remains. And for now, that is enough. I listen again, briefly, to be sure it is still there. The rhythm has not changed. It never does. It waits for nothing and no one, offering the same sound to whoever happens to be awake. I allow that steadiness to pass through me without response, letting it fade on its own, the way sleep sometimes arrives when it is not summoned. I remain where I am, listening once more, until listening itself becomes unnecessary. My attention drifts away from the window and returns to my own body. I notice the way I am sitting, the quiet agreement between the chair and my weight. Nothing complains, nothing demands to be adjusted. The body has settled into a position it recognizes, one it can maintain without effort. My hand tightens briefly around the quill, then releases it again. The movement happens before thought arrives. I register it without judgment, as I have learned to do. The body speaks often, but it rarely uses words. It communicates through pressure, tension, warmth, and release. I shift slightly in the chair. Wood answers with a muted sound, a small reminder that even still objects record change. The sound fades quickly, absorbed by the room. Silence does not return all at once. It assembles itself gradually. Breath moves in, then out. I do not guide it. I do not slow it or deepen it. It finds its own rhythm, as it always has. There is a quiet precision in that constancy, a form of intelligence that does not announce itself. I rest my hands on the table. I feel the warmth they leave behind, the faint imprint of presence against the wood. The table has known many such moments. It holds them without distinction, without memory that I can access. I think about how much the body remembers. Gestures repeated until they no longer require instruction. Movements learned slowly, then carried forward without thought. Balance maintained through habit rather than intention. A distant step echoes against stone outside. Then another. The sound approaches, pauses briefly, then moves on. Someone passes through the street below, their presence intersecting with mine for only a moment before dissolving into distance. The room adjusts again. Shadows shift slightly as the candle burns lower. I notice the change only after it has happened. Time rarely announces itself in advance. My hands remain where they are. They know this place. They have learned its edges, its resistance, its weight. For now, there is nothing to correct, nothing to improve. Simply remaining is enough. I allow that thought to linger, not because it is important, but because it does not ask to leave. Eventually, it softens on its own, making room for the quiet that follows. The body continues its work without instruction. Breath, balance, warmth, all of it unfolding beneath attention. I stay with that awareness for a while, until awareness itself begins to loosen, and noticing becomes unnecessary. Something draws my attention toward the window, without urgency. It is not a sound at first, but a slight shift in light, a change subtle enough that I might have missed it earlier in the day. The window remains open, and the night air moves freely between the room and the street beyond, carrying with it the quiet presence of the city at rest. A small bird settles on the stone ledge outside. It does so cautiously, as if unsure whether it has chosen the right place. For a moment, it remains perfectly still, feathers close to its body, head angled slightly to one side. I do not move. I allow the distance between us to remain exactly as it is. The bird tilts its head, then straightens again. Its attention seems divided, listening to things I cannot hear, measuring the air in ways unfamiliar to me. I notice how little effort it takes for it to remain balanced, how weight and tension arrange themselves naturally without instruction. I think about flight, not as an act of escape, but as a continuous adjustment. Wings do not force the air to accept them. They respond to it, moment by moment, correcting without hesitation. Flight is not a single motion, but an ongoing conversation between body and space. The bird shifts its weight slightly. Feathers resettle. Balance is recalibrated with movements so small they barely register. Nothing about it feels rushed. Nothing feels rehearsed. It is simply present, attentive to the conditions that surround it. After a while, the bird leaves. There is no warning, no visible preparation. One moment it is there, the next it is not. The ledge remains, empty but unchanged, holding the shape of what was briefly there. I continue to look at that space. Absence has a texture of its own. It lingers longer than movement does, asking for nothing, offering no explanation. I sit with that quiet interval, letting it stretch without filling it. Stillness does not always end when motion stops. Sometimes it deepens. The room feels slightly larger again, as if the departure has created space rather than taken it away. I remain where I am, aware of my own weight, my own balance, considering how often movement and rest depend on one another without conflict. The night continues outside the window. The air moves. The city breathes quietly. And for a moment longer, I stay exactly as I am, allowing the image of flight to dissolve on its own, without being carried anywhere else. The night has settled more deeply, without my noticing the moment it happened. The workshop feels quieter now, not because all sound has disappeared, but because what remains has learned how to be discreet. The candle burns lower, its flame steady, casting shadows that no longer shift as often. Edges soften. Distances seem less defined. Somewhere nearby, a door closes. Metal meets stone. The sound travels once through the street, then stops. Nothing follows it. The city does not respond. It absorbs the noise and continues as it was. That finality feels complete enough to be trusted. I look around the room slowly. The drawings are still where I left them, unfinished, unresolved. They do not trouble me. They belong to another moment, one that has not arrived yet. Tonight does not ask for resolution. It asks for less. The air feels cooler now. I notice it against my hands, my face, the back of my neck. The window remains open. The night enters without ceremony, carrying the faint trace of distant water and stone. I do not question it. I accept the exchange. Time has passed, though I could not say how much. It rarely announces itself in advance. It prefers to leave evidence afterward, subtle changes that must be noticed rather than measured. The candle is one such measure. My tiredness is another. Thoughts begin to slow, not because I guide them, but because they no longer insist. Ideas loosen their grip. Questions release themselves without demanding answers. What remains is not empty. It is simply unoccupied. I rest my gaze without choosing where it falls. The room no longer asks to be observed. It exists comfortably without attention. That realization brings a quiet relief, as if something has been completed without effort. I do not close the night. I do not mark its end. I allow it to continue on its own terms, moving forward without me following it. Rest does not require permission. It arrives when resistance fades. For a moment longer, I remain aware of my own presence within the space. Then, even that awareness begins to soften. The candle continues to burn. The city continues to breathe. And gradually, without instruction, I allow myself to let go of the need to remain. Wheels, jeers, lines.